Hydroponics, something you've probably heard of but never tried. In this video, we're going to talk about the hydroponic cucumbers we grew on these slabs and all of the efforts we put in to grow them.
They still have a flower, but they don't actually have to be pollinated. So they just form the small cucumber right away and grow off of that. Here with our cucumber plants, we actually have a few different problems. We didn't run into issues for most of the growing phase, largely since it's because it's a new greenhouse that hasn't grown cucurbit plants before, but also because we grew them hydroponically and there wasn't a lot of introduction of diseases, there wasn't a lot of potential. But we did run into a few issues of different diseases nearing the end of our production phase of this class, and mostly those were minor, actually, just aesthetic. One of the largest problems that we ran into with our production was actually not a disease, but a nutrient issue. This was also just on the leaves, so it wasn't a huge problem, but just because it had the wrong ratio of nutrients, or maybe the pH was off, our pH meter had some issues halfway through the semester, which we tried to fix, but didn't work out. So those little spots on the leaves are actually just aesthetic, but it just shows that there was a nutrient problem. Another issue we ran into was mildew. So it wasn't a major issue, but we saw this powdery mildew on a few of the leaves. So just an aesthetic problem, and we didn't really do anything about it, but just something to look out for, because if it got worse, it could cause problem to our yield, but with the amount that we had it in, it wasn't an issue. So another issue that we ran into was actually fungus gnats. So something that didn't really affect our yield of the cucumbers, but because of surrounding plants, we actually sprayed BT, which is a bacteria, so it's organic, approved. And Bacillus thuringiensis will actually eat the larvae of the fungus gnats gut first. So it solved our problem pretty well. We didn't run into that many other issues regarding water or nutrient pH problems besides the one time that we got that little burning, scalding on the leaves. So overall it was pretty good, but that's largely due to the dosatron that automatically gave us the correct amount of water per day and different timings and different nutrient levels that were automatically added to the water. So we didn't even have to do any of that.
So one of the fun things about our experiment throughout this semester was finding really strange abnormalities. Oftentimes it was because the fruit got caught up in the clips or stuck in the wires, and so throughout the semester there were just some really strange shapes.
Like this one.
And now on to the maintenance.
So each week we had to make sure that the plants were properly maintained. So we did this by pruning both leaves and some extra fruits.
In order to keep the plants healthy, we would take off every other fruit just to make sure that the fruit gets large enough and enough nutrients, as well as using these little clips to keep the vines on this twine so the fruit is off the ground and the vines are in their place. Off to the measurements. We had two different treatments. The red treatment, as we called it, had 100 ppm, and the green treatment on the right had 50 ppm.
Okay, so we measured pH every single week for the cucumbers. We use this automated pH tool.
Until it broke.
And we just would find a spot and stick it in to make sure it was making contact with the substrate and the water. And so you can see this measurement is around 5.89, and we did this for each slab.
The results were pretty consistent, so we call that a win.
We also used a similar meter like this to measure the electrical conductivity, or EC, which was the amount of nutrients in each of the cucumber plants to make sure they were getting enough nutrients from the dosatron, and it also measured the temperature to make sure that the plants were staying warm enough.
This one had a bit of a dip in the middle that caused some of those leaf problems I showed earlier, but overall it was still pretty low in general.
So another meter we used was the chlorophyll meter, and it just measures the content of chlorophyll in each of the leaves. We used a similar meter for anthocyanin content, and we decided to measure 10 plants a week. And so the way we just did this was taking a leaf and going towards the center and making sure to press down, and then it would give us our measurement and we would record it. So.
The anthocyanins are a pigment in the leaves for different colors, so that had a pretty steady increase, which was a good sign. The chlorophyll content also seems to increase for the most part, which is a good thing since that will allow the plant to do photosynthesis. And now we can talk about harvesting the actual cucumbers. The fruit are snipped off right where they attach to the vine, and then we'll put the fruit harvested from each treatment into a separate bin and do the post-harvest analyzation.
So after we harvest, we have to take the weight and count the number of fruit from each nutrient level treatment, and we also take the soluble solids content and measure that with the refractometer to measure which one has more sugars in the fruit. And we also noticed that there wasn't a significant decrease in sugar content with the more yellow fruit, which was interesting because you could think that they would have less chlorophyll, which would also result in less sugars in the fruit, but there wasn't really a significant decrease. A little bit, but not much. So that was really cool to see as well. So we just gather the fruit and then put them on the scale 3 at a time and take the weight.
For the refractometer, the process is a little bit more in-depth as you have to mash up the fruit and get just the juice without pulp using this little meter to determine how much light can pass through. So as I mentioned earlier, the total soluble solids content remained pretty similar throughout the harvesting season, which is a good thing since it gives you an indication of how sweet the fruit will be due to the amount of sugar content within the fruit. So that's it from us. We were able to harvest in total 358 pounds of cucumbers, which is absolutely incredible over the course of the season from February until April, which is not too long, and we were able to eat as many cucumbers as we possibly could and donate the rest, and we took a lot of cool measurements, so hope you learned something.